Hey guys, welcome to NAMA 26. I think this is 26.
Or
I'm
27.
losing track. Who knows anymore? Exactly. So we'll give a couple seconds for people to filter in as we are. Is it working now? That one is. Hang on. Okay, sorry about that. I unplugged my microphone. That was my bad. And then I had to reconnect it.
So the title of the talk was Effects of Heat Stress on Canine Detection and Performance.
Yeah.
And it was a vet who works with all kinds of working dogs and also pet dogs. And he's like the ER shift vet. So he works with a lot of the more dramatic cases.
Yes. And there's definitely a lot of people we talk to who are terrified that their dogs are going to die of heat stroke. You may have heard me say that already. It may have been when the mic got unplugged. And they're so terrified of this that they don't realize the number one preventative to heat stroke is conditioning your dog to tolerate heat. So go to class and make sure that your dog is a little uncomfortable. Not a lot, a little, right? It's a hot day. Leave them in the car instead of choosing the air conditioning crating inside, right? That's something I do when I go to workshops. And my dog was able to compete at a high level and plays in an NW3 on one of the hottest days in California.
As a husky.
As an elderly Siberian Husky, beating out young dogs on time, right? And just because I conditioned her to heat. That's all it is.
And he also talked about, that you need a little bit of heat stress, like Michael's talking about, to build the conditioning and endurance, and things you can do, like making sure they have really good access to water so that they can recoup a bit and then go work some more so that you can extend their abilities in heat. And, a lot of that is way, way more work. Like the work the dogs have to do is a lot more than our dogs have to do. They're going and doing a few little short searches in the heat, but it's still great for optimizing your dog's abilities, and they'll be happier and healthier if they're a bit conditioned to the heat.
Absolutely. And then also very important to keep your dogs in shape and keep them slightly underweight. These are really important
being
things.
Overweight just makes getting rid of heat so much harder.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was a good one.
And he dispelled a bunch of myths too that were interesting. Like you probably all heard this thing about, oh, don't give them cold water when they're, and he was like, there's no evidence supporting that you want to get them cool as fast as possible.
Yeah. I took like 30 pages of notes over the course of the 2 days.
Maybe you can
So
post
I'm
those
hoping
notes.
to get rid of some of the fluff and then post those for you guys. Maybe talk by talk, or it's one big document. I'll have to see.
Yeah, and supposedly this is going to be the last joint NACSW CNCA symposium.
Yeah.
So we were lucky to be there, but that doesn't mean it's ending. My understanding is the NACSW is going to branch off and do their own symposiums now.
And that the CNCA is also considering still doing civilian days
on
their own. So there will be scent detection options for us nerds.
Yeah, if you're interested in that, it's definitely a conference worth going to if you're really a nerdy and into nose work.
Yeah, whatever the NACSW comes up with, I think they're going to get some excellent speakers. I know they were already talking to some of the PhD researchers that were there that I really, really like. They were my favorite talks, so I'm sure it will be great.
So what was the second talk?
Second talk was, where'd my page go? What the heck? I lost it. Well, it was getting to ask two judges questions. And both of these judges have been professional detection handlers and trainers for years.
Luther Evans, who we know from California, he's judged. I think he was my first ever judge in a nose work trial.
I think so. We had him
the first time I ever failed a search. It was so fun.
We had him in a lot of the early trials, and he was known for being one of the harder judges. If you actually got a comment on your judge's sheet from him, you should be excited because he didn't write stuff down.
Yes.
For no reason.
Yeah.
And
who was the
then
second
Adrian?
Judge? Okay. Who I've had multiple times.
We've also had him.
He's a very nice judge. They're very different from one another.
Yeah. And so the idea was getting to talk to these two judges as an audience and ask them our questions, and specifically talking about patterns and interiors and things like that. Unfortunately, the audience didn't really know what to expect going into it. So it took us a while to kind of get going and have questions for them. But once it got going, it was quite interesting.
Yeah, they talked a lot. There's a lot of discussion on the conflicting information you get from people, which is make sure to cover your search area, but let your dog search freely. And it's like, well, which is it? Should I let my dog search freely, or should I make sure they cover their search area? And they're like, well, and they got kind of into the nitty gritty about how you make those choices. And
they also talked about what we talk about, which is teaching the dog how to cover the search area through hide placement.
Yes.
And so it was cool to hear, because I'd never heard professional handlers in that setting really go down that route of how to train these things. And so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, most of them just talk about presentation or using the leash to guide the dog around. But to hear them talk about it should be the quality of your hides that gets your dog into the areas, not your handling. It was like, oh, yes, finally.
Yeah, it was great. And, there may be detection handlers who are already talking about that we're just not exposed to, but I really appreciated that.
And next?
Then we had from search work to nose work, a SAR handler, longtime SAR handler, who is now a CNWI. And so she talked mostly about her experience in search and rescue and the different dogs she's worked and the different big projects she's been on. So there was definitely some interesting stuff in there.
Dave mentions that he would love to see your notes. You were there. We want to see your notes too. So if we share ours, you got to share yours.
And he went to the talk that we mostly skipped. So
maybe you can fill in the gaps.
I have, I think, enough notes to know the gist of the talk, but it would be good to get all of it if you wanted to share. And then the last talk of the first day was Science of Canine Olfaction, Effects on Training Method, Dog-Associated Handling or Associated Variables on Detection Performance by Dr. Nathan Hall.
He's amazing.
He's an associate professor, I believe, in Texas. And he basically has a lab where they do research on olfaction stuff. And
science lab, not a Labrador Retriever. In case there's any confusion.
A science lab. And, so all very super technical, just a very different side of olfaction. So that was really interesting. He talked about some of the projects that they're doing, testing out.
What was the really interesting study that they showed? Oh, he was showing these dogs. They were trained to press a lever to get food, and they kind
was
of
somehow
split the
associated
dogs
with-
into two groups. Group A, when they disconnected the lever from the food, kept pressing the lever for a long period of time. And Group B, when they disconnected the lever from the food, quickly ignored the lever and moved on to something new. And they found that
flexible dogs versus inflexible dogs.
yes, and they found the dogs who were flexible, actually the ones who gave up faster, learned how to obtain new odors and do those kinds of things better, which was interesting because, in general, we as nosework handlers think the dog who's more persistent, who keeps working through failure, is a better nosework dog. But their study was showing something different. It may just be this one particular thing of acquiring new odors is better, but other issues are
right. Yeah, I definitely think so. It reminded me of Hazel, who, based on what they were talking about, I think would be a very flexible dog. She switches over to anything she thinks is a new set of rules. She'll switch over like that. She, I can put her on new odors like instantaneously. And I can also, once I was, normally I either repay or pick up my hides. And once I wanted to see, okay, what does she do if I just don't? Because I want to see what she's going to do in trial, make sure I haven't, overtrained this to the point that it's going to really cause us trouble in trial. And I didn't pay for like a few seconds and she moved on. Just very, very quickly moved over to the new set of rules. But that causes us a lot of issues because she moves over to new sets of rules so fast. So you want a dog who can learn the job and stick to it, but also has the flexibility to learn new things if they need to. So I think you need a lot of balance in those things. And it probably depends on your application too. Like our friend Lauralee, who does environmental detection, she sometimes has to switch dogs from one project to another. So she probably needs some more flexibility in them being able to handle that and not, be stuck in the mindset of their old project. Sometimes they can be vastly different, going from birds to reptiles to whatever. Yeah, I think it definitely depends. Can you guys hear us?
Okay, no, you're fine. So. Just keep talking.
All right. So then the second day, the first talk was Christina Bunn, who is an instructor in Washington, I think.
Washington or Oregon,
yeah, I think Washington. She teaches at camps all over the country.
She's great. If you ever can have her out, you should have her out.
Been a long time professional handler, and she told us a bit of the story of her getting into nose work and how when she heard of it, she was like, that's this wasn't her word, but basically a bastardization of professional detection. What are they doing? And then she was invited to judge. And
she thought it was a complete joke.
Yeah, she judged and she was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then got super involved in nose work. And so she talked about handling and sort of the partnership between dog and handler and kind of about independence and, when to be more involved and less involved. And so that was really good. Was there anything else about hers that stood out to you?
Let's see. It's hard because I've heard her talk a lot. So it's easy for me to not have something stand out. Like the first time I saw her, a lot stood out, but now this is like the sixth time I've heard her.
Right. Let me see if I could find my notes on her, but we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. What was the next one?
The next one was...
Because we'll post our notes for sure, but we just want to give you a basic overview of what happened.
Yeah. The next one was Barbara Schwert, who is an instructor from Southern California, who we've known for years since we first got involved in nose work, talking about honoring the canine handler team. And she's one of the founding instructors. She's NACSW faculty. She was in one of the super, super early, first classes with her shepherd, her German Shepherd Landis, who went on to do extremely well. He either went to or was invited to all the nationals. And, lots of placement, just a really good, consistent dog. And then her younger dog, Cassie, I think. Who she got a few years ago, who's a very, very different dog, a lot more environmental sensitivity, and it's just taken her a lot longer to kind of progress with her. But it's been good from a learning perspective for Barbara to have a very different kind of teamwork and to learn from that. So that was really good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Then there was...
This was the one we missed. Most of.
Log the Dog. Every search partnership is a story and every log entry tells it, by Susanna Charlson, author of Scent of the Missing. And so,
which is the book club book, right?
Yeah, so I felt really guilty about skipping it.
But we're going to review her book, so it makes up for it, right?
Yeah. and maybe Dave can post his notes.
Yes.
But basically talking about the importance of logging your searches.
Which our new little handbook that we produced is a easier way of logging your searches than writing down details of each search. Instead, you've got a checklist that you can plan for and check off the things you've done. Although other types of logging are also beneficial if you have the patience for it.
Yeah, I think that depends on your personality. I think it also depends on what you're doing with your dog. Because I'm sure in some applications you want way more detail for problem solving if something's going wrong. And then if you are having an issue with your dog, starting to logging more detail can maybe help you problem solve what's actually happening.
Yep.
I was once doing a private with somebody and I asked her, what it was kind of problem solving NW3 issues for her and her dog. And I asked, what was there any consistency to what they usually had trouble with? And at first she said no. And then she went back and thought about it. And she said, actually, yes, it's threshold hides and interiors. And so we were able to directly address that. And I think it made a big difference. So being able to either by remembering, by logging, by looking at your videos or whatever, I actually think that can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
And then her dog that was her main SAR dog from the book passed away a few years ago. And so she'd be able to utilize the logs to remember her dog and all that. And then the last one of the day was another PhD researcher, Odor Basics for Detection and Training. And I really liked hers because she's done some experiments on odor handling and containment, like in our odor kits and stuff, and how much crossover there is with odor that's stored together. So it was very interesting.
It was actually very interesting. We learned that clove doesn't contaminated as much as like anise does, right? Was it that?
Clove pulls in more of the other odors.
Yeah, so clove gets contaminated more than it contaminates other things.
Yeah, because I guess the reason was that it has two main odors that are what we smell as clove, whereas the other ones have sort of one main odor, though they all have more minor odors. And so there was like more, I don't know, I don't remember the sciencey word for it, but for whatever reason, because there are two main things, it's easier for it to get replaced by other scents or something like that. But it still was a small like sliver of the like total odor amount. And she talked about some ways of like, if you're really concerned about odor contamination, keeping your stuff more secure is not the right word, but
uncontaminated.
Yeah, contained, I guess. And so that was interesting, but I'm not going to change the way I keep my odor.
Yeah, what did they say? That plastic baggies was the best.
Mylar bags was the best, especially if you heat seal it. So what she does with her odors, which she's in a lab, it's a lot more important for her to be a lot more careful. Is she takes like the amount of odor she's going to use, like for me, it would maybe be three Q-tips, and puts them in a heat sealed Mylar bag, puts that in a jar, and does a bunch of those baggies so that when she wants to use it, she's ready. She just cuts it open and uses it, and then next time uses the new one.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing about that one was there was a lot of like essentially null hypotheses where there was nothing, like the result was that there was no change. And that was surprising, but also very interesting that it's actually harder to contaminate than we think it does. And she had all these charts about different surface types. And if you put oil directly on, or you put it sort of on, or you put it in a container on it, and then you remove it after 1 hour, 5 hours, whatever, how long does it last on that surface? How long is
their residual odor? Yeah. It was very interesting.
And it's very short. Mm-hmm. It's a very short amount of time.
Especially if it's properly contained in an odor vessel. It's
but even the oil directly on it, what was the longest thing stayed? Do you remember the chart?
I think it was a day or two.
It was like a day or two. It wasn't months. Like sometimes we have people go, my dog alerted on the residual a month later. It's like, well, according to this study, that's not what happened.
But she also made a point of saying that she's using her machine to test these and that our dogs are much more sensitive than her machine.
True. But I think memory is way more important. Like if your dog found a hide a month ago and goes back to that spot alerts again, it's more likely your dog's alerting because it remembers a hide being there than because there's some odor still lingering there. Yeah. If you feel conflicted about whether or not you should pay, in my opinion, it's absolutely not.
Right. And then also if you do think you're actually having a problem with residual odor, you might want to contain your hides better.
Yeah.
And then she also talked about the naval research project they did, which was very interesting, but I don't think we really need to go into that.
One of the interesting things about it was how many screw ups there were in the whole thing and like how they had to constantly change it as they figured out, well, this isn't working and this isn't working. And it was
one interesting thing was that it made a huge difference So to give you enough background to understand what I'm saying, they put the dogs on a new odor, and then they were trying to test like that odor in conjunction with other things, like less pure versions. Could the dogs pick them up when they hadn't been put on them before, for like more for explosive dogs, narcotic dogs, and stuff like that? But they were using canine nosework dogs for the testing. And so it was really hard, like day one when they're like barely on this odor. But then when they retested, I don't remember if it was 6 or 8 weeks later, whether they had a lot of practice, because they split them up into groups. So whether they had a lot of practice sessions in between or fewer, they all made significant progress just by being on the odor longer. But so it wasn't saying like you have to now practice, every day or whatever, but just give the dog some time. To understand
Definitely
what's happening. Okay, should we do questions?
Yeah, we'll get on to questions. Anything we want to talk about our schedule this month? We're going to be in Las Cruces, New Mexico later this month. If you're in that area, come out and say hi. Yeah,
contact Judy Whitehead if you are interested in coming to that.
Any other events this month we should talk about? Oh, we are planning on doing the video review marathon, right?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember what date we picked. Let me look. That's kind of important. And for our local students, we are doing a Valentine's Nosework Partner Games Day, which will be fun. It'll be our first one in Missouri. We've done it twice in California. So if you are local, we would love to have you come to that.
Okay, so we'll get right to this first question. Okay.
I found the date we picked. Okay, February 10th is the live review marathon.
Okay, so that's coming right up. I better get working on it. And my computer just went into the shop, so there may be...
hopefully we get it back.
We'll have to figure out that.
We
can use your computer. Yeah. Okay, so question number 1. My dog, who can be environmentally sensitive, a street rescue under 15 pounds, is usually a boss in a trial. He loves it, is a confident searcher, and has fun. We did an element trial, and he was spooked by everything. He ran the other way when someone crackled the paper and turned around on a hide when the camera clicked and basically timed out. Any ideas how to desensitize this for this poor guy? I feel like he was trying to survive the afternoon and wasn't having any fun at all. There's a couple things about that. And with fear and really with any behavior, what happens is what they call trigger stacking, right? So it's not the camera clicking that was the problem. It was the camera clicking and the paper crackling and the new people and the new environment and all these things.
Drive.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to be very attentive to what the triggers are, because they can be very, very subtle. Like maybe the dog didn't poop that morning, right, when they should have. Or maybe we switched food last week, and that's causing digestive stress. That's adding to this stress, right? So
or
they
the
can
fact
be very
that there's
diverse.
Twice as or 5 times as many dogs as you probably have in your nosework classes, in the parking lot.
If you're working on a behavior problem like fear or aggression, you should recognize that you're going to have regular relapses where you just jump back 5 steps for no apparent reason. I'm sure that there are reasons, but we may never figure out what those reasons are. And then usually the next day you're back to where you were or pretty close. And then you continue making progress, and then you're going to lapse back, and then you build, and that's just the way it goes.
And unfortunately, because of the nature of trials, you're often lapsing at trials, and that's really frustrating and, difficult. It'd be much easier if they were relapsing in class or something.
Yeah. So the main thing is to take note of all the things that you could recognize as triggers. And if you can, take note of all the details, even the things you don't think were triggers, and isolate them and condition your dog to them. And sometimes in the moment, your dog's like really not having fun, just drop. Or at the very least, drop your criteria. Forget about passing the search. Start parading around the room with your dog, give treats, do some tricks. Do some tricks in a nosework search. Your goal of nosework is not the top priority when your dog is having a fear response. It's not important. Forget the nosework for a second.
Call, finish, get your dog out of that room if he really doesn't want to be there. We talk
depending on how fearful your dog is. If you think you can work them through it. If you don't think so, get out of there.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't always know why the dog is reacting, so we can't. You should always give your dog the benefit of the doubt. We want our dogs to be generous and charitable to us, so I think it needs to go both ways. So yeah, definitely take that into account. Fortunately, our dogs have been all fairly confident.
Except for Icy and her flooring issue,
Yeah,
which I could tell a story about, but we'll save that for now.
Yeah, but we worked her through it in the trial, and she had enough drive to overcome it.
Yeah, there was only really one trial where it was a significant issue, and there's something about that school because a lot of dogs had flooring issues that didn't usually, and hers, which we had mostly worked through at that point, came back like way worse than it had ever been because this was the first time it had ever caused us to not pass a search. And I, in fact, called a room blank that had 2 hides in it, which is just bizarre for us. But there was one room that I saw her odor response to all of the hides in that room. And because she was having such a fear response to the flooring, I couldn't recognize her odor responses properly. And it's not that I wish I had called them for the sake of the points. I wish I had called them because she was trying to do her job, even though it was incredibly difficult for her. So I wish I had been able to recognize that, call it, and pay her for it. And I think if that happened again, I would be able to because I now, in retrospect, know exactly what it looked like. But if I had been thinking about dropping my criteria in terms of response to odor, I think I could have in the moment. So if your dog is in a mindset where you can take that route, I would. Okay, next question.
Next question. As always, if you have follow-up questions, just post them on Patreon. Okay, question number 2. This is the same question. So there we go. We will go to question 3.
Hopefully you didn't miss a question in there.
Okay. I have noticed how much my 2 English Springer Spaniels tend to do a zigzag pattern in a search area. It recently occurred to me that this breed is known to move in that pattern when hunting a field. I don't know if this is also typical of other hunting breeds. Do you think that there might be a relationship between field patterning and preferences in nosework searching? If so, what do you think the practical implications might be? Very good question. And I'm particularly interested in that question because it relates to my current dog, my pointer. He definitely has a very natural field pattern of zigzagging back and forth in an upwind direction. In my opinion, there are practical implications because I don't think you should try to fight against the nature of the breed. And I plan on utilizing that natural field search pattern when it comes to exterior searches and larger searches and things like that. However, I will continue to pattern him to pay attention to thresholds, to round the corners of vehicles, and do things like that. And you can do those things. I think they have to be contextual. If my dog's in a big open field, if I try to say, no, don't do this, instead, I want you to run in a straight line and do a grid, that's absurd. But I can teach him something about doorways. There's nothing in his breed type that requires him to treat a doorway a specific way, right? And I can imprint it because it's like an object that the dog can learn something about. Same with vehicles. There's nothing in the dog's breed that means he has to search a vehicle in a certain way. So I can pattern that. Now I can choose to work him in a multiple vehicle search and let him do his field pattern because I think it'll be more efficient, which I do think it will be. I think a dog will be faster working their natural style. Or I can bring him up to a car to encourage, hey, let's work these corners and these details. And because of my pattern training, he'll do it. And he's already shown the aptitude for being pattern trained. I don't know if you've watched his videos, but you start to see it there.
Yeah, and I think then you can also, if you know that your dog very naturally understands how to get themselves downwind, then you don't have to worry about doing it for them.
Yes.
Which I don't generally worry about even with dogs who don't. But one thing I noticed with Icy, the first nose work lesson we ever did with her was that she worked the buckets 1.5 feet away from them on the downwind side. And then when she passed the bucket with odor, turned in and went to source or the food. And so I, she will still do things like that. So I never I pay attention to the wind with other dogs and for my own sake, but I don't worry about it with her.
I actually think it's a real advantage that hunting dogs have because I always tell people when I start teaching them patterning and I'm teaching them about lines and containers and vehicles and interiors, I always get the question, well, how do you handle a real big exterior search? And this pattern of zigzagging through a field is, in my opinion, the right way to approach that search area. And if your dog does that naturally, you have a huge advantage. Because I've tried teaching it to some people and dogs, and it's very hard if they don't want to do that naturally.
Yeah, I think there are other approaches you can take if it doesn't come naturally to your dog. And it's also much easier if you can go off leash. It can be
Yes.
quite hard to quarter
Yeah.
spaces on leash, unless you have a nice long line and very good leash handling skills. But it definitely has its utility when you get to work a large field, which we don't always get to do.
And I should mention that I don't think like when a dog comes into a smaller room, maybe a big gigantic dining hall is different, but in general, if your dog comes into an interior and is chaotic, zigzagging back and forth, that's not exactly doing a field search. My pointer doesn't do that going into a new room. He runs straight to the people and wants to say hi. That's what he does. But he doesn't treat an interior. He doesn't look for birds. In other words, he doesn't hunt it. Any hunting he does in an interior room, he does for food because of what I've trained. Other than that, he's more interested in focusing on people and doing obedience and those kinds of things.
My guess would be like certainly the environment of a field, like the history of knowing there are birds there and all that, like does some of it. But I also think the wind difference does a lot of it. So you have that natural wind pattern, and I think that also incites the dogs to utilize it efficiently, which you don't have in interiors generally.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Next question. Thank you for that question. It's a good one. We did an AKC trial on Saturday. It was a disaster. He false alerted, never seemed to find several, and I called when he pawed a box in containers. I'm assuming that it was wrong.
And also maybe that he doesn't normally paw. I'm not sure.
Maybe, yeah. Is it unusual to have bad days like this? We do great when I'm doing hides and in class, but we get to trial and look like idiots. What else should I be doing?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. So one thing to note is that it is totally normal for dogs and people to have bad days. And the same thing I said earlier, that you want to be charitable to your dog. They have a bad day. Doesn't mean you have to redesign your training program. It just means they had a bad day. Now, if all your bad days consistently line up with trial, that's not a bad day problem. That's a trial problem. That's a trial nerve problem. Primarily, the only difference between class and a trial is that you're nervous.
And potentially in some situations could be that you haven't taught your dog the transition from known hides to blind hides.
Yeah, if you haven't done a lot of blind search, like in our classes, we don't do very many blind searches. So there is a transition of learning that the handler needs to do about doing blind searches.
But also from the dog's perspective of if you are not being careful not to act like you know where the hide is, then you may look entirely different to your dog, blind versus non-blind. And that's something I would definitely try to self-assess. Or suggest that you try to self-assess. And if that may be part of it, find a way to not telegraph hides to your dog and to, learn how to really follow them and think about your search area and not think about hides.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a thought and it left my head. I was just talking to a student about that, about how much we play the hotter, colder game with our dog. And, you happen to know hides over here. So you're like colder, 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 warmer, 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 colder, 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 right? And it's all these little body language cues that we don't know we're doing. And that will cause our dogs to struggle when it's blind, when we stop giving those cues, or if we accidentally give those cues, now the dog's like, oh, there's odor here, or there's definitely not odor that direction, and they miss a whole part of the search area. And we think, well, I was letting them search freely. It's like, no, you weren't. There's no such thing as a free search. Your dog is responding to your body language no matter what you do.
Yeah, and so you need to make sure that you're responding to your dog's body language. Yeah. And really, like, if the only thing you can do is notice where your feet are pointing, do that.
Yes.
Because so much of the time, your feet are probably not lining up with where your dog is going.
Yeah.
They're either pointing to a hide or they're pointing where you want your dog to go, which can be useful in certain situations when you want to make a suggestion to the dog. That needs to be a conscious choice to make a suggestion, not something you're unaware of and not in control of.
Yes.
There was something specific in that question. If they're not finding hides in trial, it may just be nerves or what we've already talked about.
So building odor obedience and playing games, this is why we do games. Games are not about having fun. They are fun. That's not why we do them. We do games to generate stress, to force people to feel stressed out when they're working because they're more competitive and there are rules that they're not expecting or anticipating. And this causes them to handle differently and allows the dog an opportunity to work through that stress and have fun with it. And that kind of thing.
To not feel like their owner's gone crazy in a way that they aren't used to.
Now, another thing that's worth mentioning is you mentioned that we went to an AKC trial. So how does the dog do in other venues? If this is brand new to the AKC venue, it might have to do with AKC odor. They scent their odor very differently. And if you haven't exposed your dog to that, that's sure to cause problems.
Yeah, especially what you describe about the dog seeming to work the odor and then not be able to land.
Yeah.
That could definitely be an odor threshold exposure issue, which is an easy fix if that is it.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Yeah. So I would try to find opportunities to do stressful competition type searches, but in a way that you can support your dog more. So a lot of people actually use AKC in this way. Their main venue is NACSW, and if you trial NACSW, you don't get to trial very often, right? And
unless you're very lucky.
Unless you're very lucky and you have a very big radius of how far you're willing to travel. So they use AKC trials as a way to go have stress of new location and competition searches and all that good stuff. But in a way that you can do it more. It doesn't hurt as much when you fail because you can earn legs. And if you fail one search, the other searches still count. And so you can go in and do things a little bit differently. You can have a little bit of stress, but not as much as NACSW. It's hard to do the same thing in the reverse direction because you can't use an NACSW trial as prep because there's too few and far between.
And stressful.
They're very stressful. They're way more stressful than an AKC trial is in general.
But on the other hand, it may be too much to use at AKC that way.
Yeah.
Because of not knowing, not being able to say to the judge, I just want to support my dog in this search. Can you tell me where it is? Can you tell me the reward? Which is something you could do with an instructor or a partner if you want to kind of have a middle way of bridging the gap.
Yes. And that's something, I have students who ask me that every now and then, like, I need to do competition searches because I want to have the confidence of doing blind searches. And so we do that for our students. And we do semi-blind where it's set up like a competition, but we can help you if you need to. And we do a lot of searches. I just talked to someone else about this, is that as an instructor, you need to do, at some point, throw your students out into a blind search with no safety net. No bailing them out, no stepping in and saving them when they mess up. Because you need to see what happens when you take the safety net away. Now, I'm not saying do that every week. I'm saying it
Definitely
needs to happen a little bit.
Week.
Yeah, it needs to happen a little bit. And I do that to my students, probably once every other month or once a month kind of thing. And it's great if you have a monthly curriculum. You can do that on the first of the month, put them out there and say, okay, this is a blind search. You fail. I'm not going to help you. And now you know what you're working on the rest of the month. Right. Yeah. Or the next 2 months. It's like, man, you guys all blew that threshold high. We're working on thresholds, right?
Yeah, I did an NW2-3 prep at the end of December, and everyone's, well, not 100% of everyone, but most people struggled with the inaccessible hide I had kind of under a cart. So we talked a lot about reading your dog, and then we did a lot of inaccessible to accessible hides in class to help with the reading, but then the dog still gets to source it by opening whatever it's in. Or uncovering it in some way. But I do think the supported blind where you tell them when the dog gets to it can be a good way of really allowing the student to see what they need to see in a blind search without detracting from the dog's confidence and foundation and odor obedience and all that. Mm-hmm. And you can also, as an instructor, utilize it as a time to either you or the student talk through what they see in the dog as they're running. And then you can get a picture into their mind of what do they see? What do they not see? How can you help them see more? And then they can also feel more confident about what they're seeing. Because I really believe that verbalizing it makes it more real. And helps it not just be something that after the fact you go, oh yeah, I saw that. Well, would you have said it in the moment? And to me, that's what really tells me if you saw it, if you understood it.
Yeah.
So I love doing those.
Something that it's on my list of rants to do, that I really think is a super important valid point, is when you have a dog like this, who you're bringing up, I really think it's important to go for the blue, go for the ribbon, go try to win. Because what does that mean? It means you're going to be a little quicker to call alerts. It means you're going to move out of unproductive areas a little bit quicker. You're going to do everything a little bit more punchy. And I think that builds confidence in the dog, and it also provides quick reward opportunities for them. So if you call an alert really quick, there's two choices of what happens. A, you're right, and you can pay them really quickly. Or B, you're wrong, and the judge will direct you to hide so you can pay them really quickly, right? And both of those outcomes are great for a dog who's doing beginning levels of nose work in a new environment. Yeah. Those are great options for them. And you might come home with a ribbon, and that's really fun, and it's
confidence boosting.
And I think so many people do the opposite thing where they go, oh, well,
I just want a cue.
I just want cue, and he needs the experience. Like, he needs the experience. What the hell does that mean? It's like that's the rant. As someone told me that recently, and because I said go for a ribbon. They failed the first search of the day. And I was like, just go into your other searches and go for it, And they're like, oh, but he needs experience. What does that mean? Experience doing what? Not having someone call alert quickly?
I don't know.
Why would a dog need that experience?
And also finding mock trials and other fun events where you can try things out, experiment with different things in blind searches or supported blind searches. And then we also do something we call self-verified searches, where someone else hides it, so you don't know where it is, but you don't get to call alert. You have to actually find the tin or odor vessel of whatever kind. So your dog tells you it's there, and then you go and you look for it, and you discover exactly where it is. And that not only is very interesting to the dog, and they enjoy you truly hunting with them, but it also helps you see how the information your dog gave you translates into reality and where the hide actually is. Mm-hmm. And then you can still reward its source and all of that.
Yeah. And this
it's not as good for like good timing, but it's worth doing.
Yeah. I think we're getting into kind of another question, but I want to make sure that we don't have any thoughts on the original question of a dog who's just totally off at a trial.
Well, if the dog is, I don't have enough info about the box smashing.
Yeah.
But
she didn't say smash the box. She just said you pawed a box.
Oh, pawed a box. So I think that pawing is a frustration behavior. That for a lot of dogs, like occasionally it's a reliable indicator of odor, but very often it's not. It's just something the dog does when they're frustrated, and sometimes that coincides with odor, and sometimes it doesn't. So I probably would never take pawing as my alert in trial. There has to be something else that makes me call an alert. Like checking the seam of the box or whatever. But their nose is what's finding the odor, not their foot. So I wouldn't call an alert based on a paw.
Okay. I think hopefully we answered your question. If we didn't, send us follow-up.
Feel free to send follow-up questions.
Okay. So next question. So now that Buster's passed his ORTs, by the way, this is the Buster from the How to Get Your Dog Excited About Hunting video.
Yes, the Aussie Doodle.
Yes. Now that Buster has passed his ORTs, can I compete in L1s? Also, is it okay to start training him on NW2 hides while I wait to get into an NW1 trial? Yes, once you've passed your ORTs, you can enter L1 everything and NW1. Those are completely separate things, but you can enter both and start moving up the levels on each side. Now, you don't have to finish all your L1s before you go to L2 or NW2. Sorry, and you could be all the way at elite division here and still be on L1 here, and the reverse. You could be all the way up to L3s on this side and still be at NW1 on this side. And so a lot of people use the element trials as, like we talked about, practice, using AKC as practice. A lot of people use element trials as practice for
especially if you have an element that's really a bugaboo for you.
Yeah.
If you can, like, say containers are an issue, you can spend a day doing 4 container searches, really get some practice and see, if you do have issues, where your issues really lie.
Yeah. And then the other part of that question was,
should she work on an NW2 hide?
NW2 hide. So you should have already been working on those from the primary level. Okay. And so let me just clarify this, because there is this idea in people's head of NW1 hide, NW2 hide, NW3 hide, elite hide. And I don't think that is true. That doesn't really exist. There are different rules, of course. So in NW2, there can be multiple hides in a search, up to 3 hides in a search. But those 3 hides could be NW1 hides each.
And you can have
Right?
inaccessible
NW1 hides. So, and also those 3 hides, you should have done 3 hides in primary, which Buster did. And almost every dog has done multiple hides for food, right? Inaccessible hides and food and toy distractions. And so those are the things that they add. The only thing it's not like the hides are actually harder. It's just it's really the information that's given to the handler that's harder.
Mm-hmm.
So in NW1, there's 1 hide in each search area. In NW2, how many hides there are. But there are also distractions that you don't know where or how many there will be. There are multiple hides, but there's multiple hides, but that's still different information. Like if I know there's 3 hides, that affects my psychology more than if I know there's only 1 hide, right?
Yeah.
So all of that affects you. In NW3, I could set an NW2 trial and just add 1 more search as blank. So it's the same as an NW2 trial, essentially. And all I have to do is not tell you how many there are. Now it's an NW3. It's the same exact hides. There's no difference in difficulty of the hides. The only difference is the information to the handler.
And then also in NW2, I think knowing that there can be inaccessible hides can screw some people up because mostly they just don't know when to call. So they haven't learned how to see when the dog is trying to get to source but can't.
Which it's easy. If your dog should have found it by now, it's inaccessible.
Yeah. And
you're going to get some wrong. It's fine.
And it's something you can work on. So if it's not going well, just, fix it.
Yeah.
But I watched and I volunteered in NW2 a while back, and I was in the vehicle search, and there was 1 hide, and it was just a little bit inaccessible behind a tire. And the dogs could not have been clear on exactly where the hide was. They were going to this side of the tire, that side of the tire, the top of the tire, in the whatever it's called.
Wheel one?
The
hubcap?
Yeah, the hubcap. Just totally drawing the picture for the handler, but not landing on one specific spot because they couldn't get to source. So they were being very honest, very good. It's exactly what I would want to see as a handler. And several people timed out. And the judge was like, yeah, it's right there where they were. And they're like, oh, I was waiting for them to source it. Well, they couldn't. The dog was doing exactly what they're trained to do, and a beautiful job. So you have to just remember what your parameters are and keep an open mind to that. But on the same, thing, I don't want to train to the rule book either. I want to train problem solving. I want to train high criteria of getting to source and, lots of drive building and, keeping things interesting for the dog, but I don't over worry about what the parameters of the trial are.
Remember, any hide can be an elite division hide, right? So in my mind, like all of my students are training in elite division hides from the very beginning. Just think about it. I can put a simple hide on a park bench that you could consider NW1. But if I say the whole park is in play, now that's elite division, right? Or summit division, depending on what you want to think. So just remember that it's about the context that hide is in more than the hide itself. Mm-hmm. Now, that shouldn't stop you from setting advanced hides. I don't think there's such a thing, but you should always be training to a goal, not just setting hides. So make sure you're achieving some goal in every training session. That's why a lot of people think that the hides I set are easy. I don't think they're easy. I see most of the hides people mess up in trial are easy hides. So don't think of them in terms of easy hides and hard hides and these kind of things. Train to a goal, achieve that goal, and then move on to a new goal. And then you'll have success at every level.
All right, next question.
Yeah, next question. Brian mentioned here that his NW2 exterior in Tucson was 3 NW1 hides in a relatively small courtyard. That's a great example.
And that definitely has its own challenges.
Yeah. And if you're able to break the search down and treat that search, like break it into smaller search areas, then you can basically, instead of doing a 3 hide converging problem, you can have 3 NW1 hide problems that you just do boom, boom, boom. Mm-hmm. Now you don't know where those 3 hides would be, but if you cut your search area intelligently, you can basically end up with 3 individual searches, which is great. and makes that search a million times easier. I saw that at several NW2s I've been setting recently, is the people who broke the search up logically in their height. And that's not to say micromanage their dogs. It just means they had a clear image in their head of, I'm going to search this area, I'm going to search this area, I'm going to search this area. And the others who just said, I'm going to search the whole area and look for 3 hides, almost all of those dogs failed. They found 2 hides, especially if the dog was really good. They found 2 hides, and then they got stuck.
Yeah, and it's also really easy to panic when you found 2 and you know you have 1 left. So having that search strategy can help you not panic.
Yep. Okay, next question. Can you speak more on your feelings of handler discrimination in AKC? I believe you say working towards handler discrimination and scent work can be confusing to the dog. My dog is doing very well at the just starting master's level. We got our novice handler discrimination when we first started, but haven't practiced any beyond gloves. Now it's becoming an option at trials in my area. Should we give it a go or just focus on odor? I actually have no problem with handler discrimination itself. I train my dogs to find and retrieve articles that have my scent on them for obedience trials. I have no problem with that. The problem I have is that they use the same boxes that we're going to use for nosework trials. And I believe that can be in the beginning level. And I think that can be confusing. So if you trained handler discrimination to a very high level and then blew through the novice level really quickly, it probably has 0 effect on your dog. But if you do what a lot of people I see do, and you train it in boxes so that you're prepared for the trial, you can totally confuse the crap out of your dog. Because we spend a lot of time teaching the dog to ignore our handler scent, right? In the context of nosework searches. So we have an article, we have a document about this on Patreon that you can read for more in depth how we feel about it. I think it was a sad choice they made to stick it in boxes in the first level. I wish they would change that, make it more like a normal search for obedience. Even if they put your Q-tips in a sealed off PVC pipe or something like that, that would have been better for me.
Yeah, just the context difference for novice dogs, it's challenging.
Yeah, and if you're already at that top level in your nose work, you're probably not going to hurt them that much by going back and doing novice handler discrimination if you want. You don't need to, but if you want to do it, it's probably not going to hurt them.
Yeah, I mean,
but if you're starting
intro,
like beginning nose work and handler discrimination at the same time, that can be confusing.
Yeah, so I would just be thoughtful about how you're training it and try to give as many contextual differences to your dog as possible. I would probably, if I were doing it, I would do a different search command, a different change of equipment, especially for,
I
novice,
think
at all, but
that if I took Lumi and entered her in handler discrimination next week, her obedience training to identify articles with my scent on them and her nosework training, that we would not have to practice it once. We would pass. Why? She's going to go up and down the rows and smell a bunch of empty boxes. And one box has clearly something inside of it with my scent. And I think she will show some change of behavior that I will be able to read and call.
Yeah, I mean, the only challenge is that there's also the judges scent out there.
Well, the only other problem is that she'll probably try to retrieve it.
Yes. Well, I also know someone who decided she was going to do handler discrimination. So she just played with her dog, because you can use a sock in novice. Played with her dog with the sock for 2 days and then ran the search, and her dog did just fine. She was like, the sock we've been playing with. So
Catfish would do that tomorrow. Absolutely. Yeah. He already does that.
He loves playing with clothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, he would do that with any object. I can play with him for 5 seconds with any object, put it in my living room, and he'll find it. It's really fun, actually. I've never had a dog this just intuitive about scent games.
Yeah, but so I think a lot of it depends on the dog, and it depends on your goals in nose work. But really, if it's something you want to do it. Just find a way, whatever is the least confusing way to do it for your dog.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we got lots of questions.
Oh.
We got 3 more questions here, 2 more on the document, and a couple on Patreon. So next one. Got into the L1C in February. What types of challenges should we set up to prepare? I believe only boxes are allowed in L1C, but I expect boxes on chairs, maybe larger boxes. Any other ideas? So I think that there's a couple things that when you're preparing for a trial, there are certain things that you should prepare your dog for that sometimes drop off the radar. So, for instance, potting on command. How solid is your dog's potty on command? How is your dog about resting in their crate? Are they free all day and they're not used to being confined? These are the things that I think cause dogs to fail more than nose work problems. So definitely setting my dogs are used to the lifestyle of living in crates and coming out to work and do that kind of thing. So they're used to that. But if I had a dog that lived with me in the house loose all day long, or like, let's say my cat who's loose all day long, they suddenly create a nose work for cats venue and the cat has to be created in the car between runs. Then a week before my trial, I would already be prepping.
Ahead than that.
Yeah, probably longer than that. I would start doing the training of you're in your crate for an hour, you're out for 50 minutes. You're in for an hour, you're out for 50 minutes, and stretching that out. Then you're in for 2 or 3 hours, out for 50 minutes. And so we're conditioning the cat to handle that. I think you should do the same for your dog. You should also be preparing for whatever weather conditions. You're probably going to have containers outside and inside. So make sure you're conditioning, like if your dog's inside in air conditioning and it's hot or it's cold, start spending some time where you have them outside in the worst part of that weather so that they're starting to get conditioned. Now, on to specific challenges. I think you're hitting all the right things. Larger boxes, boxes on chairs, boxes on chairs.
Smaller boxes.
Yeah.
I've seen very small boxes in container trials. Granted, I don't know if they're, they may or may not still use boxes like that, but I think very small boxes can be hard because they breathe on them in the box.
Although, honestly, if it were my dog, I wouldn't be doing any boxes. I'm not a big fan of training boxes, and I'm not a fan of drilling boxes. So I would probably be focusing primarily on new locations. I think dogs get bored of boxes really quickly. And so I don't do a lot of boxes in preparation for more box searches. I think I know a lot of dogs who go into those searches now and they're like, oh gosh, more boxes. And they just false and they just quit.
But I've seen in container trials a lot of boxes outside on grass, half of it on grass, half of it on another surface.
Yeah.
And that tends to worry people either because they haven't done containers on grass or just because they have potty issues or whatever. Or containers in very small rooms where you have a lot of space pressure.
It's not the containers that are the important part. It's the context they're in. And you don't have to train that with containers. Like if you're going to have containers on grass, you could just do exterior searches on grass and achieve the same result. If it's in a smaller room, then you can just train in smaller rooms and achieve that same result.
Stuff a bunch of stuff in a small room. It doesn't have to be boxes, but make it feel tight. And then if I were to do some boxes in preparation for a container trial, especially if it's a dog that maybe has shown boredom towards containers before, I would have boxes incidentally around my searches.
Yes.
Open,
but odor not in them.
Odor not in them, but just around, maybe odor near them, maybe odor pooling in them. Maybe occasionally, like if I did a multi-hide search, one hide might be in a container and the other ones aren't.
I think getting your dog focused off of the containers a little bit before you do container search is very important. In fact, that's one of the number one things I end up doing with dogs who have issues with containers is no hides in containers, but containers out. So exactly what she's saying. So we go the opposite direction. And then a lot of those dogs recover and do really well in containers later.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. And I think for, even for dogs who haven't shown boredom towards boxes, it's worth preempting it, especially because our tendency is to overwork anything that we have coming up. And so just, make it more about being an odor search than being a container search.
Yes.
We also tend to restrict our dogs to the containers. You can't be further than 6 inches from a container when we're doing a container search. And that makes it harder for the dog to work the odor problem if it's moving at all. And it's annoying to the dog.
Yeah.
So I really treat container searches like just regular odor searches, except that I'm not going to call anything but a container.
Yep. I think those are all good
walls
points.
Super useful in container searches because there's still, potentially odor going up to a wall. I know there was a trial I did with Hazel where she kept trying to get to a wall and I wasn't letting her because it was quite far away. And I was like, no, it's a container search in an NW3. And I'm super nervous. And I think, based on what the judges said afterwards, had I let her go all the way over there and work back, she would have worked it out. I don't remember what happened, how we did in that search, but it would have been a faster, more successful, less frustrating for her search if I had just let her work.
So I actually had a student in California who took this advice a little, maybe a little too much to heart. It was very funny. I was judging an ORT and she signed up, and she comes in and the dog's not interested in the boxes. Maybe they've overworked boxes. I don't know. But she comes in and the dog starts going to the wall and sniffing the table. And she's just working the dog along that wall, up and down, up and down.
Yeah, all of her body language says it's got to be on the wall.
For 2.5 minutes. And I'm horrified. Like,
freaking out.
She's going to call alert on the wall. Like, what is going on? The boxes are right there, and she hasn't touched them. She's gone up and down that wall. She ended up timing out. But here's the interesting thing. She left after timing out and came back in, and the dog nailed the next two. It was almost like the dog learned the wall really didn't pay, and if I want to get paid, I better pay attention
and
to these
she
boxes.
acclimated to the search area.
Yeah,
too.
So she missed one of her ORTs, and she probably could have got it if she had directed the dog to the boxes. But I think maybe the dog gained something even more important than a title that day.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think slight body language differences from the owner might have actually made the first one doable.
I think she definitely fed into the wall.
Focusing on the wall, if she had just opened up back to the containers, the dog probably would have moved back in. So be careful not to oversell other areas too.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Sure. Next question. Should students be concerned about driving to a training location with hot containers in the vehicle while dogs are also in the vehicle? Are you concerned that the dogs in the back may smell a hot box in the front while they're traveling to the training location? Good question. There's a really interesting study that I was told about a long, long time ago. I wish I could find that study. If anybody has that study, let me know. Or if it's a myth and that study doesn't exist, let me know too. But the gist of it was they studied rats who lived in the same room as the object, the odor they were trained to detect, and rats who didn't, to see if there was any increase or decrease of the odor obedience. And what they found was that rats who lived in the same room as the odor they were trained to detect actually did better than the rats who didn't. And they explained it, I believe they explained it as the rats associated the scent with home and safety and those kinds of things it got paired with. I think it's simpler than that. If you've conditioned odor to mean the dog's reinforcer, so let's say food, okay? And so that odor means chicken, right? Chicken. And then I leave odor on top of the cage. It's like leaving chicken on top of the dog's crate. If I leave a plate full of chicken on top of my dog's crate all day for days, is my dog going to come out of that crate more focused on chicken or less? And we might think, well, they'll get acclimated at some point. I guarantee you they're going to jump out of that crate and snatch that chicken real fast, right? Yeah. I mean, I know this happens sometimes where a treat falls in our crate room and it's there overnight, and I let a dog out of the crate and they're like, straight to it, right? And that they've been over there for 8 hours or something.
Yeah, well, and even Icy's ball, she sometimes tries to take her ball into her crate, which she's not allowed to do. So I take it from her, and sometimes I put it on top of her crate. And as soon as she comes out, she's up there and grabs it. And it could have been an hour or two. It could have been overnight. But she obviously is aware and cares that it's there, which maybe that's mean to leave it there.
So I think that odor being out of reach, but a reminder is like tantalizing to them. So the moral of the story is leave an odor tin outside of your dog's crate every night. Definitely do not do that. I have no idea what the effects of that would be, but I definitely would not worry about traveling with my dog with hot boxes in the car. I think it will make the dog more excited. It's like traveling. If I go to a hunting training day with birds in the car, he would go crazy.
Yeah, and he's like, oh my gosh, they're here. I'm going to get to work them. They're here.
No doubt in his mind what the plan is, right? He's like, same. If I put my odor kit in the car, that odor kit isn't fully sealed. There's odor escaping from that kit. The dogs know the odor kit's in the car. We're going to do nose work. They're excited.
Yeah. On the other hand, I usually prep my boxes when I get there, but I certainly wouldn't hesitate to carry hot boxes if I needed to for some reason. If I needed to have them pre-prepped for some reason.
Yeah, or if we're going from like one class to another and we're just using the same boxes from group 1 to group 2.
I don't know.
I
always
just
put
throw
the
them
tins
in the
back
car.
in the kit.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about it. I think it would, if anything, it would make the dog more excited. I don't think it'll diminish their odor obedience at all.
No, what would diminish it is if you gave them access to the box and they
Yes.
refused to pay.
Yeah, if you put
Over
the
and
odor
over and
box
over again.
in their crate while you travel, that might diminish their odor obedience. Just like if I put the chicken in my dog's crate, when I get to class, they might be full. So, yep,
Or they might eat it.
that's what I just said.
Well, no, I mean the odor.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
tips.
Yeah. In light of our discussion on the Facebook group about dogs eating tins.
Yeah, I
That may
wouldn't
be-
give my dog unrestricted access to Q-tips, that's for sure.
Okay. Blank searches, tips, hints, best practices, things to avoid. I've been doing some blank searches since I saw Michael's seminar in Phoenix, but I want to make sure I'm doing it right. As we advance to master's level, I understand I don't want my dog to ever stop hunting on his own, but I was trying to find subtle hints to tell me when we are finished. I've also the goal of being able to pass an area once and be pretty darn sure it's clear, but then the what ifs pop in my head during the trial.
The what ifs are always going to be there.
Always.
So that's something you have to just deal with your own psychology.
Mhm.
I definitely subscribe to the I don't want my dog to ever stop hunting, which means I have to decide when we're done. I cannot wait for her to decide. If I wait for her to decide, we have been searching way too long and she's probably taking a nap.
But I also think it's funny, like the little subtle cues let me know, John. It's not a subtle cue that the dog hasn't found anything.
Right.
That's a very obvious cue.
Yeah.
Right?
So if we search a space and my dog doesn't start working odor,
Because you know when you should know when your dog catches odor. So if your dog goes to a room and they're not catching something, that's a big clue.
or even sections of a room. Like there was in one of IC's NW3s that we titled, but I spent way too long in two of the rooms because I let my assumptions get in my head. We'd found, I think, 2 hides, and there was a large section of the room. It was a whole bunch of kids' desks. And it was like an old, like, I don't know, 1800s classroom or whatever. So a lot of interesting smells. And we worked in there, and she worked her little butt off all the way around the room. We didn't find anything. And so we go and we finish clearing the rest of the space. And I'm like, oh, but what if there was something in that section? It was so big and so complex. What if we missed something? So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to cover it more thoroughly. We're going to go through the rows. We go through the rows, and she searches, but we don't find anything. I should have been more than ready to call finish. But I was like, oh, but she's working so hard. It's ridiculous. She'd covered everything. She knows her job. If there had been something there, she would have told me about it, or she at least would be working very obviously to try to nail it down. So that was just nerves. And if I cover the space and my dog doesn't find anything, I just have to call finish. And you just have to be willing to, maybe you missed something, but then it's a training issue you need to go deal with. If you gave your dog access to the space, they should find the odor.
Mm-hmm. So we did kind of answer this question in the last NAMA, so I do recommend going back and watching that. We probably covered it in a couple others. Eventually we'll timestamp them all, but I think this is a topic that's worthy of its own special video, so I will add it to my list of lesson videos, not just because it's a common problem in trial, but also because I think it's missing element in basic foundation training. If you've been watching my starting from scratch videos with Catfish, you'll notice I've done like 4 or 5 blank searches with him, right? And I think people need to get comfortable with blank searches at a very early stage. Comfortable seeing what their dog looks like, comfortable saying we're done, right? Comfortable missing a hide too. You're going to miss some hides, and it's not you shouldn't be finding those hides because you forced your dog to search long enough.
Right. If you're having to overmanage in order to find a hide, then that's some training you need to go back and do.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to learn what hunting looks like, not just what catching odor or sourcing odor looks like.
Yeah.
Know what working, when they're really working, but they're not finding anything, so that you can know that they did their job in that area, and therefore you can call finish. Because you could have some day where your dog's not working for some reason, and you walk through the whole space, but your dog was never once searching, and so you missed 3 hides.
Yeah.
But So then, again, that's knowing what does hunting/searching look like, what does catching odor look like, and finding odor.
Yes.
Because we so overemphasize the odor side of things that we don't know what hunting looks like sometimes.
Yeah. But we need to get comfortable calling finish. So take opportunities to work blank searches whenever you can. I remember one NW3 trial that I did. The exterior search, one of the staging areas, we actually went into the school and staged in a classroom that was right outside the exterior. So when they were ready, they would just call us through. And so the person dropped me off there, say, just wait here until the judge calls you. And I said, thanks. And we did the whole room blank right before I went out into the exterior. And it's just like second nature to me to do that. The dog likes hunting. It doesn't hurt that. So it's going to increase their hunt drive. It's going to make them more excited and make her more antsy when we got to the exterior.
She caught odor. It's like, it's
hit
finally
it
here.
Hard. I think I have that video on at least on YouTube, if not on Patreon. I may not have analyzed it, but there's a threshold hide there. We come out that door and my dog's like, bam, I found odor, because she'd searched that whole room ahead of time and found nothing, right? But just do that. If you set up a search for yourself somewhere, let's say, search the area right before as a blank search. Do it. Search it, then go in and just start making it a habit to do blank searches every time you go out to search. Do at least one. It's scary at first because everyone thinks it's going to ruin the dog or demotivate them. It doesn't. It really doesn't. Your dog goes through blank searches his whole life and he hasn't died, right?
If it does, you're doing it wrong. And you're probably upset about it or something.
Yes, because I've seen a lot of people. I had someone almost walk out of a seminar with me because I did a blank search. People get very upset about not being able to give their dog a hot dog. It's like, well, your dog's going to live. I promise. So
Any
true.
more questions?
Yeah. So these are off-book questions, although it's 9:15. We've gone over an hour. So I think we'll save these questions for the next NAMA.
Okay.
Do we have any closing notes? When is the next NAMA going to be?
I have not looked at the calendar. But let's see.
So we're looking at the calendar now. Start submitting your questions for the next NAMA. Let your friends know about this because they can add questions too. Patreon patrons' questions will always be top priority, but we'll try to answer anyone's question if they ask it. And it's free for anyone to watch, so let your friends know.
I think we'll do it on the 17th because the 24th will just be coming back from
Las Cruces.
Las Cruces, yeah.
Yeah, so 17th of February.
Which is President's Day.
Yeah. The next time we're both out of town, we should do a NAMA out of town and invite some other CNWI to answer questions with us. It might be interesting for you guys to hear opinions of other instructors too.
Yeah, we should see.
Too bad we didn't take advantage of CNCA. There were lots of great instructors there that we could have probably pestered.
It was busy though.
It was busy. There was not really any time.
No.
So yeah, send your questions in. Put it on your calendar the next NAMA. Thank you guys so much for watching. It was great.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we'll
Were there
add
anything thoughts on Patreon that we need?
Let me double check
respond
Patreon
to?
to make sure there weren't any follow-up questions. Let's see. Best
Did we address
transition
them?
to blind hides.
Yeah, we talked about that.
We
quite a
did
bit.
talk about that, but I will add it to next week's NAMA as well because I do have some thoughts about introducing students to blind hides and how to do it. So, yep. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you next month.
All right. Bye.